we enter a prompt and we are able to spy on our...
The one I use the most is...
Yeah, how does that work when it's unplugged but you're given a plug for unplugged?
Copilot and ChatGPT is like a teenager. There's so many things that you need to do to get it to work as advertised. We kind of narrowed it down to 4 or 5 kind of key things that need to happen. The first one is
adding just that little bit of je ne sais quoi.
I'm just not wearing pants, just be aware.
Ready?
Let's do it.
Hi and welcome to the Cloud Architects podcast. Today, with added offense, some innuendo, 3 hosts and 2 guests. And we are talking to Stephen Rose and Daryl Webster, who do 2 different things, kind of, but the same, and very topically are going to talk to us about Copilot AI and how useful or useless it is. But Stephen, let me hand over to you for an introduction.
I'm Stephen Rose, ex-Microsoft, now own my own consulting company specializing in helping companies to drive adoption and leverage Copilot. I also do a webcast with Darrell for Petri called Unplug IT that folks can check out at petri.com/unplug IT. Darrell?
Yeah, how does that work when it's unplugged but you're given a plug for unplug? Daryl Webster, known as Darrell as a service in the community. I am a change manager for Rapid Circle, a co-host or co-pilot for Stephen Rose on Unplug IT, and general all-around nice guy.
Both of you are returning guests. Stephen, I will say that you actually have the distinct honor, if I will, of being the most returned guest that we've had. So this is your 3rd episode with us, I think. So
It is, yeah.
Welcome back for a 3rd time. We're glad that you came back.
Love the work you guys do. It's great. And I'm excited to be here, even at 10 o'clock at night. I'm just not wearing pants, just be aware. So it's short.
So I want to dive straight in. We started having conversation a couple of weeks ago. It feels like a couple of months ago now. And we were talking about how contentious Copilot has become for companies with existing data, existing humans, who are trying to make this thing work, and very excited about ChatGPT because we've all fired up the prompt and asked ChatGPT to spy on our neighbors and been told, no, that's a privacy issue. But now we fire up Copilot, we enter a prompt, and we are able to spy on our colleagues. And I know the salary information of the folks sitting to my left and to my right. Is that what we expect from Copilot, or should there be more? Should there be less?
I heard a great quote the other day that someone made, and they said Copilot and ChatGPT is like a teenager. If you turn to a teenager and you say, how was your day? They'll say, fine. But if you say, how was this class? And did you take a test? And what was your grade? They'll say, oh, the class is going well. I got an 86. It will only give you back as much as you put in. I think Copilot at its core is a great idea. I think the problem is companies who jump into it after about 90 days are often going to jump out of it for a while because they realize there's so many things that you need to do to get it to work as advertised. And by that, I mean, when you see the cool Microsoft videos, it takes a lot that you have to clean up and do and prepare to make it to work like that.
Say it's not so.
Very well
I thought
said.
I could just add Copilot.
Right.
Chris, I'm shocked.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, right? I feel like we're, and this isn't specific to Microsoft. Generally, I think our industry is very much like that, right? The new whiz-bang thing that is available, it's always just click, 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 you're done, right? Just enable those licenses and off you go, off to the races.
Right.
And like you said, Stephen, I think it's important that organizations understand the real sort of prerequisites for actually making something out of this, right? This is what you need to put into this system, this platform, in order to actually make the best possible use out of it. And I don't think everyone quite grasps that yet. Even the folks who are out there promoting Copilot with absolutely everything they do, I don't think they grasp exactly what needs to go in to make this a useful tool. And how do we do that in a secure way is the other part of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, Daryl and I, we did a show on this and we kind of narrowed it down to 4 or 5 kind of key things that need to happen. The first one is, obviously all of your content has to be in the cloud. If your content isn't in the cloud, forget it. Nothing's going to happen. It's not going to work. It can only read what's there. But number 2 is you have to go in, reduce the amount of information. If you've got 10 years worth of emails, if you were not doing shared links, but sharing files, things like that, none of that is going to show up. You also have an issue for companies that aren't really using Teams the right way, that if you have a bunch of group chats, those don't show up. Neither do the files that are shared in group chats. If somebody created a folder and shared it with somebody 3 years ago, then everything in that folder that they've dropped in since then, because they forgot to stop sharing it, is going to be found by Copilot. So there's so much that has to kind of happen on the front end in order for it to work the way that you want. And I'll stop there. And I know Darrell has some thoughts on that too. So I'll let him chime in because he had some good comments on this when we talked about this a few weeks.
We know that the sharing aspect of things is all about oversharing and understanding what information could still be shared or shouldn't be shared. I think these are questions that organizations should have been answering before Copilot. We know this too. Getting your information in order, structuring it correctly, improving on search, because it really is just search in the background with an LLM and some fancy stuff with graph. But yeah, I think that it has been said that it's a bit like Delve all over again, that it is showing you exactly what you
Yeah.
can see. So even when a link has been shared with people using everyone in my org, that's not necessarily going to share everything with people in the org, but it will for those who have clicked on that link. So Copilot's still your assistant. It's going to remind you about things that are available to you, but yeah, not necessarily everything.
Yeah, it very much is a garbage in, garbage out. And I tell folks if they've been using Teams, and I'm going to use this term loosely, correctly, but if they're really using it as a collaboration tool, if they're doing their work, having their conversations, recording meetings, doing all that in Teams, not having a lot of group chats, but actually having the chats inside there. Copilot, you're in a pretty good place to roll out Copilot because now you've got your content in the cloud. It's organized, syntax can attach to it. If you've turned on labeling in E5, even better. But if you haven't even done that, it's going to be a mess. And then add to that, like I said, people keeping 10 years worth of emails. And then, of course, the less content you have, I tell people if you can limit your email to a year's worth of email and any full files that are older than 3 years but haven't been used and have not been used in 90 days, move them into Azure Cold Storage because that then reduces the amount of content that Copilot has to choose through to get the right answers. I had a client where they hadn't done that, and he asked to create on a PowerPoint a group of people, and it picked all men with very white names because that's the way they did things 5-8 years ago. But now through diversity and inclusion, they make it more mixed to mixed groups, and it didn't know that because that's not how it is. Think about the way you talked about a product 5 years ago, and then ask Copilot to talk about it. It's going to gather some of that. So pruning that content is really, really critical to ensure you get quality information from Copilot and that it can learn faster what correct is.
Can I add something here too? Stephen's talked about how an organization that is mature, is using the files in the cloud, is making connections. They're using the tools, basically. One piece, and of course I'm invested in this, is user behavior. And that's really the common thing, isn't it? That if you're not an organization that is using Microsoft 365 in the way that it should be, you aren't going to get good results. You're not going to find the information that you should be. You're not going to make the connections or find out about people and what they're working and what they're doing. There's still a big piece of this is user behavior and user adoption.
So
And it's
Darrell,
rudimentary.
I just want to throw something in there because you use such a subjective word And sorry to speak over you there, Chris. It's, with the lag that we've got between continents, I apologize. But Darrell used a word which is super contentious, which is should be. That assumes that Microsoft tells us how to use products in such a manner that we get the best results. Is that even a thing?
Well, I was going to say, I think that, and to that point, this very much speaks to the old sort of adoption versus enablement, right? Like, are you licensed for something versus are you actually using something? And we've had that conversation. I think everyone's had that conversation. But also, I think the other thing that it speaks to is doing the fundamentals right, which is one of my favorite things. And I actually want to get a T-shirt that says, do the fundamentals right, bro, or something to that effect, because having, for example, the correct information in your directory, right, is really, really important as that stuff flows through into SharePoint, into Teams, into places. Being able to build hierarchies of your organization, that stuff all relies on clean data. And what we often see is that folks don't always do that. There's a rush to get the project done, right? There's a rush to go to the cloud. So, we don't need to have all of those fields populated correctly to sync the stuff into Entra ID. Let's just do it. We'll clean it up later. Guess what,
Well,
folks? You didn't.
I think you bring up an important point, and that is why customers and people that are using this should go to conferences and things along that line, because it's not why use Copilot. It really is how, and what are the best practices that other people are doing? What are the mistakes that they made? When I was at Microsoft, that was almost my thing, is not to sell a product, but to help share those best practices. What are other people doing? What are the problems they're running into? What have they done wrong, and how did they fix it? And I think that's one of the first questions when you're talking about people that are using Copilot. Say, look, how did you get there? What mistakes did you make? What were you wrong about? What were you right about? What are best practices that you can share? And that's really where the community events and so much of that stuff comes in, because then you get that reality check on it. It's like when you take exams. There's the Microsoft way of doing something, and then there's the way you actually do it in the industry. And if you understand the Microsoft way to do it, that's great. Then you figure out how to really do it, but you understand what that difference is. And I know when taking all the, Microsoft exams, that was a big part of it. And it's the same thing in real life.
It's a very valid point, right? I often think that, and I joke about this, but I think there is a little bit of truth to the fact that Copilot it's a solution looking for a use case, right, for a lot of organizations, because they go, well, we've got this cool thing, we're going to enable it. What are we going to do? Oh, let's do a chatbot. Well, hey, do you need a chatbot?
There's lots of different ways of using Copilot, though, and there's lots of different Copilots. So I think in some ways, yes, as far as an organization is concerned, what data is going in, all that lovely stuff, that's definitely a conversation that people need to have in certain organizations. But
yeah,
when you start thinking about what the average person like me or you use ChatGPT for, what is it? What is the use case you use ChatGPT for now, right? So like having ChatGPT or Copilot in my Outlook right now, that helps me write a letter I really don't feel like writing. Or, like adding just that little bit of je ne sais quoi to that like intro piece of my architecture that I couldn't be bothered with because I've been busy with it for 3 hours. That is a completely separate use case that actually doesn't have any handle on any of this stuff. Like for me, Copilot at the moment, currently, even though I work at Microsoft and there's a whole bunch of this stuff flying around about how to adopt one of the 120 Copilots correctly. If I look at the one that I use the most,
and they're all called Copilot, which does not help that situation either.
Exactly. The one I use the most is the one in Outlook, the one that helps me write an email faster, or the one that helps me summarize a thread of emails that it's not necessarily like dirty data or data inside the SharePoint or whatever the case may be. It's my email box that I've let get too full because I've been a bit busy. So I think in some cases there's a bit of a use case discrepancy as well, because Copilot can just be that dude that can help you on the side, that can just help make your life a little bit easier. It doesn't have to be that massive conversation. Look, sure, I get it.
Right.
Financial services industry, and you want to enable it, and there's a whole bunch of other stuff you have to think about because it can cause a whole bunch of other issues.
Right.
But like,
and I'm working with a financial services
Yeah.
company and a pharmaceutical company. So
Like,
yeah, there's a lot of what can we do, what can't we do too.
Yeah, what happens if you turn on Azure Copilot inside the tenant? Who can
Yeah.
do what, and who, so sure, that stuff is hardcore. But for me, I mean, my favorite let's go around the room. What's your favorite Copilot, Darrell? What's your favorite Copilot, Steve? Steven?
I mean, for me,
Yeah.
it is because I have 5 or 6 different clients and all doing different things for me before a meeting to say, can you summarize the last meeting and action items and what we shared? That's huge for me because I'm going from a pharma to a non-for-profit to a software company in Germany to a pharmaceutical company in Japan. So a lot of different things going off. And I'm also doing some work for Microsoft too. So what can I talk? What can I? So that is really great. And if I take a day off to summarize those meetings and get me caught up so I'm ready to go and answer emails and do things, for me, that's been one of the most valuable. The problem I run into is the pharma companies and some of the other ones don't record meetings. They only keep chats for 30 days. So I have a very, very limited window on that. And we're trying to sort of sort that out. But for me, it's helping me, already being ADD boy who will go down a rabbit hole, to better sort of switch between the different hats that I'm wearing for these customers and be prepared and look like I've done my homework.
100%. Darrell?
Like Stephen, I do find that the Copilot within Teams is useful. And again, it's a bit like keeping on top of that context switching. As a consultant, and often in the role that I'm in, I mean, I have in the past, I've become quite adept at making notes at the same time as chairing a meeting, running it, facilitating it. Love OneNote for that. But what I've been enjoying is turning on transcription or recording the meeting and being able to give a fuller focus to the discussion, the ideas, the thoughts. I can draw more stuff out. But what Stephen said too is this is a downside to it, is it's all about who's hosting that meeting. If I'm in control of that, I'm hosting it, I can record. I've got the transcription, great. But if it's been hosted on the other side, that's a whole other challenge. I think my number 2 for that, a bit like you, Waza, is, I mean, in the role I'm in, again, I don't think I go to Copilot and say, "Can you write me a communications plan for this change management, campaign that I'm running?" Because I know what I want to type. Exactly, I know what I want to type, but I do actually appreciate the help of. I've randomized out all this stuff and these thoughts here. I want to sharpen that up. I want to get that into.
Help me sound less charismatic.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
See,
So that's available. Yeah, but I think that's one of the modes that you can use as a Copilot in various different places, can't you? There's create, there's ask, there's understand, there's themes to these ways that we can use M365 Copilot, and that's one of the ones I find useful across the different products I use.
Fantastic. Chris?
I would say the only one that I use with any great deal of, often, I guess, great deal of consistency is GitHub, Copilot for GitHub. That's the one, and I guess that's where I sort of started my Copilot journey as well, right?
It's beautiful.
Yeah, that's I love that. I don't really. I also have some, like with some of the clients I work with, etc. There are some reasons why I couldn't just go out and do, use Copilot. I'm using a lot of their systems and things like that. I love GitHub Copilot for GitHub. I'm not sure
Chris,
what the correct name is this week.
Do you have the GitHub Copilot pause? I've heard this is a thing, that as someone's coding and they pause and they wait to see what is Copilot going to suggest to finish off my code for me.
I don't think that I've gotten quite to that level of it just yet. No.
Okay.
Yeah, my way of writing code is very weird, I guess, compared to a lot of other folks. So that's, but I found
Let me
Copilot
ask
to be.
you this. Do you see Copilot lessening your value as a developer at some point because of its ability to be able to create code and code snippets and code bits and get people started? Do you see that lessening the value that you have as a developer at some point?
That's a good question, right? And so, and I write
That's
mostly.
why I asked it.
Yeah, I write mostly PowerShell and sort of automation and script stuff, right? So I'm not really out there building apps necessarily. So in my world, and this may just again be my way of
And that's
working,
fine.
but I don't, I I don't see it replacing what I'm trying to do necessarily, or lessening my value, because I've got the idea of what I'm trying to do. Sometimes it's the really silly thing of saying, well, I'm doing 3 other things also at the same time. What's the most efficient way for me to do that? And how can I reduce the 300 lines I've just written to,
Sure.
be a little bit more succinct, right? So I don't think my answer to that would be no, I don't think so at this point. And I liked your sort of analogy earlier, right? It's very much a garbage in, garbage out situation. And I've also had, it give me, for example, some commandlets that don't even exist in the real world, right? Like, here's a commandlet for that. No, there isn't. There's no commandlet. So
Oh,
that
that's
type of
funny.
stuff happens as
Yeah,
well.
but you were probably using Gemini.
No.
So I had to dig in there. I mean, like I saw some things the other, like for instance, we had a Microsoft event, the build events that have been pretty much happening all over the world, right? And Gwyn, one of the dev advocates for Microsoft, she does a beautiful keynote around how to use the GitHub Copilot and all of the different use cases and around how she does it and why she does it and what she does with it. And some of these principles around, be specific around what it is that you're trying to do. And, she basically puts down like 3 or 4 bullet points in this keynote on how to use and what to get the best out of that Copilot scenario. It's amazing how just by knowing those 3 things, she was able to get so much more out of the Copilot and become a more efficient developer, but it wasn't necessarily replacing her. However, as I was talking about at the beginning of the call, something like an Open Devon or a Devika, where you can now go and take 3 different or 4 different agents and you can specify the system messages for 4 different LLMs and have them talk to each other. And one is the tester, one is the coder, one is the planner, one is the customer, and you get them all to talk to each other in this loop. And you say, this is the outcome of what your product needs to be. It needs to look like this.
Right.
And they start doing it in this loop, and you just start watching these logs and you start watching these AIs talk to each other. It's like, whoa.
Is that also known as Skynet 1.0?
That is a very Skynet moment. Yeah.
That's one of those things where you say, oh my. So you've literally there replaced 5 people like one thing. I mean, obviously they need assistance, right? I mean, I don't think it's there yet, but if you look at what AGI is doing now, perhaps maybe someday, or like, I don't know, at this point in time, I just want to buy some NVIDIA stock. I think that's what I'm doing.
Warren, you had a quote for us a couple of weeks ago, which says that the use of AI should be a co-pilot and not an autopilot. And particularly when you talk about bias and accuracy, and I think, Darrell, you might have touched on this in one of your shows because you talk a lot about message center notifications. And there was one that snuck into tenants a little while ago that talked about Copilot for Microsoft 365 will get better grounding for Word, Excel, PowerPoint, and OneNote. And why would a Copilot need to be grounded in the first place? Doesn't it need to know everything that it needs to know already?
Well, if you just throw something at it like we've all learned to use Google and pop some pigeon English into a box and hope that everything comes back, you're not really going to get the answer that you want, right? So grounding, not only is it about the Copilot grounded, but also the grounding that we give it when we give it a prompt. And so, yes, it will have its many sources available to it, and graph as well for interactions and the like. But we do have to narrow it down. And it is like, let's go Copilot, Autopilot. Think about it still being our personal assistant.
Yeah.
Well, actually, I'll put it in another way. Real scenario, of course. Some of us, we work internationally and we have to work with people that are across the other side of the planet, and they might need to make some changes to a video, a graphic, or something like that. If we don't give specific instructions to them, narrow it down, help them through those steps, it might be 24 hours before we get to go, no, that's not right. Try again. So the more that we can ground in the first prompt or the first request
Yeah.
and tell it what the boundaries are, then we're going to more likely get those results back that we need.
And I think internally, the other important aspect of that is, number one, when you're dealing with your own data, is to, turn on, if you have E5, turn on labeling, but also taking a look at syntax and how that's set up, because that becomes key. That's what sort of becomes the card catalog of how do I look at different words and tie them together and associate them with things. The LLM can only do so much, but when it starts to look at data, if you've done good hygiene on your data and you've leveraged labeling and you've done good labeling and syntax, it'll bring you more accurate information than just telling it to dip into a pool and drag out what seems right. So again, these are those back of the house things that we've talked about that can be done to make it a better experience out of the gate, is that hygiene, that governance, and doing those things, which hopefully you're doing anyways for a security standpoint, so that DLP picks that up and, your information protection picks that up. It's just building on top of that. So a lot of these things are things that people needed to be doing anyways, and now they're being forced to do it through Copilot, and even a little bit more. So some of this is really long overdue. Some of the hygiene and security and governance that really should have been done a while back.
Yeah.
That's a very good point. Hey,
I'd like to ask I want to ask a follow-up question on that, Steve, since you are our nominated representative of America on this show. And traveling through America as a South African, there's a lot of observation. And sometimes I've got to be honest, when I travel through America, I have to dial down my sense of humor, because it's very easy to create offense, even if it's, and we joke about it, but we don't necessarily want to offend someone if we can avoid it. However, we have also found that just in our excitement of using a large language model, that we get an output from a prompt that we're very excited about and show someone, and implicitly have created offense without knowing. Since the model itself might have been trained or is trained on data that contains bias, because as human beings, we are biased. Even in our human biology, we are biased towards our left-hand side of our body or the right-hand side of our body. And there is a sense of imbalance that we just learn to live with. However, when it comes to data, I think that's relatively easy to correct. However, when we get out of structured data land and we start talking about documents and generating pictures or even generating moving images, it's very hard to not unconsciously create bias, or it's very hard not to be offended by something that an AI may create for me, because I didn't know how to prompt it in a manner that would not create bias.
Jeez,
you give
that
us some
was
commentary
well
on
done.
That was well
That was
put.
like the hardest question to ask, and you asked it so well.
No, that was perfect. And I am so the wrong person to ask about. Anybody that knows me will say Stephen Rose is the wrong guy to ask about being politically correct. But I will say this. There is a great book by Michael Lewis, the guy who wrote The Big Short and Moneyball and some other things. And he has a whole book on bias and unbias. And he talks about a basketball player who just looked funny, that he just did not have the look of an average athlete, and everybody sort of wrote him off, and he ended up becoming an NBA superstar. And colleges and other folks didn't pick him up because he didn't have the right look, and how he shot the ball was unconventional. It is perspective on some of that. And I think, and I don't know how Copilot looks at different countries and the languages they use. I know in South Africa and Australia, there are terms that if you use them here, women would hit you, and you use it there, and they say that word all the time. And we won't say what any of those words are, but it is all different. And I know the same as we move into other countries. And I think that's something that in time it will learn. But I think this is where you can't trust anything that comes out of it without looking at, and that's why it gives you, here's where I got that information from. And I'll find sometimes I'll ask it a question, but I'll take a look at the resources and they're 5 years old. And I'm like, no. I need to say within 2024 or within North America or things along that line. So again, it goes back to that teenager scenario. You're going to get what you ask it, and you may have to be more specific. And the more specific you are, the better. But at what point is it taking you longer to try to explain this to Copilot than for you to just go do it yourself? But looking at those references becomes an important part of that as you do it. Hence why, so many companies are like, you can use it, but don't trust it. Don't send things out without trust, but verify. And I think that becomes a really important point of this tool, especially, you take a look at the cell phone. It took 13 years to have 100 million users. We had 100 million users at ChatGPT in 90 days.
Wow.
This is a very, very young technology compared to just about everything else that has become a key piece of the world, from the worldwide internet to cell phones to all of these things. And you have to remember that when you're using it, and that it's going to take time to mature and understand.
Darrell, I saw you nod meaningfully there a couple of times, and
Mhm,
obviously our listeners aren't going to see that, but
No, they're
could
not.
you give us a little bit of your perspective on that?
Well, firstly, I wanted to ask Stephen. He's mentioned a couple of times about when you ask a teenager to do something, you're going to get what you've asked them. I mean, how do you do that for starters?
Right.
Um,
You have to
actually,
first start by asking them to take their earphones off or earbuds
Yes.
out, and to put down the
Yes.
phone and look at you. That becomes the
Right.
first part. So yeah, very much
All right, so let's stick with that analogy and think about grounding a teenager in the conversation. So first of
Yeah.
all, earbuds out, put your phone down, listen to me. I've got your full attention. Yeah, very good. There's something that I wanted to throw in here as perspective. We've been talking a lot about our readiness. Are we ready? Do we understand it? Are we coping with things? And even Nick asked or pointed out the should. We should be doing this.
Right.
Was Microsoft ready? Because, and then maybe this is controversial, but we said we're going to be controversial on the show. We've seen lots of beautiful, pretty buzz videos of all sorts of products that set the tone, set the vision, and that's the point, right? We are. This is how we now receive software. It's never going to be fully functional. It's going to be the Death Star with big chunks out of it, but hey, we can still shoot lasers.
That would be the Death Star 2.
But yes, sorry, you're right. You're right.
Making
The
sure
first one
for
was
all
fully
the
functional.
nerds on the show, that would be the second Death Star, not the first
can
one. The
send
first
your
one was complete,
complaints
blew
to-
up. The second one wasn't. All right.
Very good. Yes, exactly.
Nerd.
Exactly. So, nerd, yeah. Was Microsoft ready for M365 Copilot coming out? A lot of people have gone to it, tried it out, and have had these high expectations of the Copilots within each of the products, and maybe they're talking to it expecting a lot more than it being an unruly teenager. Like, can you make a decent PowerPoint for me based on this document? Okay, here you go. Here's the Microsoft color palette and the designer's best guess at what it thinks will be pretty, and it's scanned through the document to an extent, by the way, because there is a limitation on how far it can sort of search through the document with its credits. And it comes back maybe picking up on some of your formatting in the document, maybe some of the headings and structure. It's going to create slides around that. But it's not really yet meeting expectation. And, we're all want things to succeed. And we know that eventually Copilot will be this amazing thing that matches the video. But today, and was it ready to release when they did? Long question.
Yeah,
Where
no,
you
I
going?
agree. And as someone in marketing and someone that worked in marketing there for 15 years, there are a lot of great ideas that you have to put something out there and put a stake in the ground before everyone else does. Otherwise, if Google had done that first, everybody would have said, well, then Google owns AI and they're the company to beat and do that. By Microsoft not being
that's a
fully
great point.
baked, but coming out, it gives them that edge and the perception, which is really, really important. And that perception has helped them where they are now ahead of. If you ask them who's leading in AI, they won't say Apple, they won't say Google, they'll say Microsoft because of that. Are they seeing out beyond their skis? No, I think they have an idea where they want it to go. I think they have a great idea of what it can do. I think it will take a lot of time to get there. I think there are missteps, like Teams Premium is horribly confusing when you look at Copilot and Teams Premium, which one does what and how to use that. And we've had this conversation. And some of these things, if they had thought about it, if they had known where they were going to be and had looked at that earlier, probably different decisions would have been made. But I think they go, this is what we needed to do. And this would be an idea we can sell on companies and get them to invest in now, if they're willing to wait through on all the mistakes and get to, that. It's like, you never buy the first year model of any new car. You always wait till year 2 or 3 when they fix all the problems. And I think that's going to be it. But I think from a business standpoint, if you're not, or as in the great words of the great American movie, Talladega Nights and Ricky Bobby, if you're not first, you're last. So, and that's the way that it's
I can't believe we've got a Ricky Bobby quote already.
But I just thought, being an American, I can bring that in, and
there
it
you
would
go.
be good.
So serious question,
we'll go
though.
over there with
Do
the
you
Ricky
think-
Bobby and sit down and discuss with those guys about how we should do that or no. Sorry, Chris.
Do you think that them sort of being the first also allowed for them to peg the price point of where this should go? Because they've essentially set a precedent amongst all of or have they set a precedent amongst all of the AI vendors and platforms, right, as to how much this thing costs?
I don't think any company with a decent amount of seats pays full price for anything, and they've already discounted premium to a lot of other companies. So I don't think it's as much about price. I think it's about saying, this is the vision, and this is truly what it is. They missed it with Cortana. They came out with Cortana second. Siri was out first. Cortana could do more, but Siri became the gold standard. They learned that with iPhone. iPhone came out. It was all about the App Store and doing that. Zune, all of these things, they've been second. And they realized, if we're going to do it, we got to do it first. And we may make those mistakes, but look at every time Microsoft has been second and how that's fared for them. It hasn't. Yeah. They have lost that market share on most of those products and services, or had a hard time catching up. The cloud is one of those rare things, but they were not much behind Amazon and Google when they were doing it.
It's a challenge, though, isn't it? Though, where you can pull the pin first. We're there. We've released. We've got Copilot in Bing, and boy, did it really make some waves, didn't it?
That was the key, was getting that, that engine, that framework.
They had the whole world questioning, is Bing truly going to take over Google? Because it was really coming, it was really charging ahead. But it's one thing to be first out of the gate with setting those expectations. And like, as I said, like, we are in technology, we do expect things to not be quite right. In fact, we're told we should be checking results every time. We should check for accuracy. But it's those organizations that have come with full expectation that it's going to do everything that the videos show. How do we help people with their expectations?
I remember when the first Loop video came out, and I was doing a session, and I was in the front of the room, and I show the Loop video. I go, "Isn't that cool?" And everybody goes, "Yay!" And I go, "What does it do?" And everybody's like, "I don't know." I'm like, "Let me actually show you a demo on what this does and what it can do," because the video, while as pretty as it was, didn't really tell you anything. And that's part of that smoke and mirrors aspect. which is, again, getting back to, it is important to actually talk to customers and to sit down with people who are using it and what's working and what isn't, tuning into podcasts like this, sitting down with MVPs, joining the community. That's going to be those things. But sit down with someone before you roll this thing out and talk about what are the lessons learned. That's all I'm talking about at almost every conference this year is going to be, how do you really prepare? What should be your expectations? And what are the things you need to do to make this work right? And a lot of it starts with using Office right and getting your content into the cloud and hygiene and security and all those things, again, as I said before, that you should already hopefully be doing, are going to set you up for success. If you haven't been doing that, you're not building on a strong foundation for the rest of the things you're going to want to do later.
And on that bombshell,
I loved Loop personally until they made it compliant.
Until they made it compliant.
This compliance thing, it just sucks the wind out of everything, doesn't it?
This compliance thing, no, because like now it's like it's a SharePoint thing, right? So like any sort of
it's
policy
always
that-
been a SharePoint thing, Warren.
No, I know that. but
Secretly.
what I'm saying is like, so now my my Microsoft Loop, needless to say, has
Yes.
become very difficult to manage because I need
mm,
multiple site collection administrators for the
Well, a lot of
folder.
it's also in OneDrive. So yeah, that becomes part of it
No,
as
I mean, it's
well.
like,
So
so yeah. So
yeah.
now, I mean, I've got like a note or a place that I put some cool things that I found was nice, and I made some
yeah.
icon things and made it look fancy. And I was like, cool, this is a really rad notebook. Oh, but now I need somebody else to admin it with me. Otherwise, bye, it's gone.
Yes.
So it's like, oh, so now, yeah, I think Loop is more a personal thing.
Those are fighting
I-
words for Darrell. He's going to get into it with you. That's it. You
That's
just
okay.
called him
It's-
out.
it's
On
okay.
our next exciting episode.
Right. He loves
That's
him
awesome.
some loop, so you don't want to mess with that. Wow. I see
I'd
a
like
50
to offer an
page coming.
opinion, actually, if I
Yeah,
may.
please. I mean,
And
look,
Please, Nicholas.
I'd like to offer an opinion, or maybe a summary. And I'm going to pick on Chris as my nominated adult to
Oh,
give
boy.
me
Here
an
we go.
opinion on my opinion. And it sounds like we in the world of should, and we are actually on this show, we never once used those words of quote unquote best practices, because it appears
Oh, now you've done it.
we're making these things up as we go along, but actually we're not. We are in a world where it is useful enough, it seems, if we know what we're doing and if our data is clean enough to give us nonsensical answers, or sensical answers, as it were, right? But if we look at the state of most of our customers who've been around for 10, 15, 20 years in Office 365, have just amalgamated data, and I still have that proposal or that contract that's 10 years old, it's got the wrong language in it and our old company logo, and now I point Copilot at it. What are you making out of this, and what would you tell customers
Right.
today based on the conversation that we've just had?
I think one of the things that really lit a light bulb for me actually was something that Warren said. And it was that I think Microsoft have done themselves a disservice by calling everything Copilot, because I think it's very difficult for folks to discern or differentiate Copilot as something that adds business value to our organization versus something that makes my life as an individual contributor easier, better, more productive, right? So I think one of the things that I, one of the big takeaways for me here is obviously the basics are important. The basics are always important, whether the conversation is Copilot, whether the conversation is security or anything. Like, let's think about those fundamentals, right? I think that's important. I think, as Stephen mentioned as well, like the governance security stuff should have been done a long time ago. If you haven't done that yet, if you haven't started that journey, probably should do that before you start looking at Copilot. But again, like a really big takeaway is, there are tools there that you can use as an individual to make your life easier that don't involve you having to get your entire organization's data estate in order, right?
Yeah, there are definitely stages of it, and the customers that I'm working with are all at different stages and different aspects of this, and no two customers are alike, but there are definitely the common threads, which is you're going to have to change some habits on how people do things. Number two, if you're using Teams in a good, solid way, you will find that Copilot will fall into line very easily. If you're not really using Teams as your main collaboration tool, not going to happen. If you haven't been using the cloud and OneDrive and sharing links and those sort of things. I mean, one of the things I told our customers, I'm going to talk you into turning off attachments. First of all, it's not secure, creates a lot of issues, a lot of problems. And if you just teach people how to use cloud attachments, you'll save a ton of issues and Copilot will work better and these sort of things. So sometimes it's these bigger seismic shifts, but it's like, okay, how are we going to teach people to do that? How are we going to change those habits? Much easier for someone who is younger, but for someone who email is their life, telling them to use it less and change the way they use it is very, very difficult, which is why it is a combination of change management, adoption, as well as the technical aspects, and trust me, it's helped me to start up a company from nothing a year ago and have 7 or 8 customers and be able to be successful is because of that. And it's sitting down with other people who have tried it or are doing it and go, what have you learned? And it's all those things. So I think you've all chimed into that. And that's one of the reasons, why Darrell and I enjoy working with each other is we both understand that if you have good adoption and good use, other things will happen. But if you're not at that point and you don't understand change management, it's just not going to work for you. And that's something we keep coming back to.
Yeah, Chris talked about fundamentals from a technology standpoint. I mean, there's fundamentals there too in the adoption space. We can't assume that people all know how to give instructions. I've often thought about this, with talking to Copilot. It almost feels like it's biasing towards a manager who knows how to give instructions to people, but a regular person, they don't necessarily know how to say that. So there's fundamentals in helping people to make the most of Copilot and that.
Right. And there are 2 key words there. There's fun and then there's mental. So think about that.
Well, mental fun. Woohoo.
Well, mental, which actually is, a whole different thing. But yes.
We've all looked at Copilot with the most, I'm going to say, destructured data set in the entire world, which is our documents and things that we create. And I wanted to ask Warren what he sees actually as an Azure architect using Copilot on the most exact data set that there is, which is effectively what you've built, and there's no ambiguity. You've built something and you can ask Copilot questions about what you've built. And so getting away from the modern workplace setting of asking a language model a subjective question about a subjective data set, what are you seeing in your landscape as an Azure architect where you get to ask Copilot questions or prompt Copilot for things on non-structured subjective data? What does that look like for you?
Yeah, so first off, I would say it's probably not called Copilot. That's anyway, you know what? Okay, I'm torn with a lot of the stuff that I'm doing. Because so it's all public knowledge that the South African Revenue Service, or the IRS for South Africa, has purchased a ton of AI capacity from us. And their AI application go live is in a couple of weeks. Now, when you think about how an IRS or an agency like that works, they randomly select people to audit to make sure that your taxes have been done correctly and that there's been no lying. And the reason that they randomly select people is because they don't have enough people to go and analyze the tax returns. Now, what happens if you had an unlimited amount of auditors, which they now do?
Oh, wow.
Every person in the country can now be audited. Every company in the country can now be audited, right? Because you have an unlimited amount of virtual agents that are doing this work. So I'm conflicted at the fact that I've probably just made my life more difficult. No, look, I mean, my tax is all good. I'm just saying. But when you think about it, what's happening now is it's going to be good for the country to be able to do more around bringing money in, whether they spend it in the correct way or not because of our corrupt government, who knows? But the fact is, it's there. So there's a lot of things that people have been doing already. We look at some of our medical aids, some of our insurance companies that have been building these algorithms manually, right? Machine learning, if this, then that. Take this set of data, compare it with that set of data, take this database, put it over here, merge these two types of things together, take a percentage, and this is the likelihood this person has of getting cancer, or this is the likelihood if this person was drinking the night that they were driving because their credit card was swiped at a bar, something to that effect. All of that stuff's been done manually. Now it's not, or it has the ability to not be, right? So what's happening is you have this back-end processing that people have been doing already. So it's enabling a lot of this insight that everybody was building manually to not be done manually anymore. They had the data already. It was clean. It was in databases. They've been, Discovery, for instance, a medical has been collecting information on me for the past 15 years. It's all there. It's all sitting there. My insurance, my life insurance policies, my house insurance, my credit card, my medical aid. Yeah, they remember my no, it wasn't a colonoscopy. It was a gastroscopy. 7-8 years ago. I had it. It's there. It's data. And so now an LLM can go back and look at that. So in the Azure space, we're seeing stuff that's being enhanced like that. And in some ways, it's not even a Copilot. It's a button. It says, press this button, go have a look at this person and tell me how likely they are to default on this loan.
Wow.
And it'll go, and this LLM, bing, bang, boom, in the magic in the background is going to come back. It's not going to be subjective. It's not going to be asking a question. It's not going to be a conversation, but there's going to be a system message. There's going to be something there in the prompt flow and the planner that has said, you are a tax agent that is going to do the following things. You're going to look at the following data. You're going to look at the following laws. And you're going to compare this person's document, and you're going to tell me whether they've done a good job or not. Click. And that's sort of where it's not actually it's not even a Copilot anymore. It's like, talking to another person.
Companies are using it to look at resumes and to find good candidates and things along that line. And then I've been looking at the first round of resumes, so looking for keywords. There was a great story the other day to tell which of his students might be using ChatGPT in a term paper. He put in within it, in summary, insert word banana and I forget, sombrero or something, and then he made it like 1-point font in clear or white text so that wouldn't be picked up. But if somebody copied the whole thing, he would look at anybody that had the words banana and sombrero in it. He knew those were people who just copied it and pasted it into ChatGPT or a tool like that. So we're going to evolve with this. And both ends are going to, and there's going to be a push and pull. As there is with any technology that changes how we do things. BlackBerry died out because iPhone had a better way to do things, and people learned how to not type on a keyboard and type on a screen. There were times people said, nobody wants a phone without a keyboard on it. Well, guess what? People got used to it. People changed, and that comes into that change management adoption, that at a point, there's going to be a tipping point where more people are using it than not. And it's going to be for critical things that they will need to do, and it will force folks to come over, as they always do with any technology.
Yeah, it's the next shift, man. It's the next shift for sure. And as my final comment, actually, because I know we're running out of time, has anybody actually turned on the I talk to you function thing on ChatGPT? Like, just do yourself a favor, in the car with your car kit, when you're stuck in traffic, hit the little headphone button, have a conversation. I had a conversation with ChatGPT about living on the moon the other day.
All this living on the moon experience you
Yeah,
have.
no. It was a question. I asked a question around how many people have actually set foot on the moon, and then she told me, but she's enticing me to talk more. She wants to learn. Listen to her responses. What is it about the moon that intrigues you? She asks. Oh, well, what would we like to live there? Maybe, I think. Oh, well, we'd possibly have to think about the following things: what we'd make it from, what we'd eat, where we get the water from, how long we could live there. Oh. And then once she's finished answering me, she asks me again, what do you think we'll be doing in the next, or why do you think we would like? And then I'd be like, okay, let's keep going.
Would you like to go with me to the moon? Says
Next thing
ChatGPT
you
now.
know, I've been talking to this new virtual girlfriend for the past 45 minutes, and I'm in my driveway. It's like,
Yes, except he did forget when he put on the earphones that his wife was sitting next to him the whole time, and
Well,
do yourself
hopefully they allow you to have your phone with you in prison when you get taken in
Right.
for tax evasion. Ladies and gentlemen, we'd like to thank Warren for his contribution to the show over the years, but we may not see him again.
due
after
to
next
several
week, when-
intercontinental laws and Interpol intervening. Yes.
and now he's living on the moon.
Oh,
Absolutely.
that's awesome.
Great
Great
way
way
to end the show.
great way to end the show. But I guess before we let you guys go, Stephen, Darrell, I know you talked at the beginning of the episode about your podcast, but I want to ask each of you: is there something else that you would like to plug? Maybe Stephen, starting with you.
Well, sure. If you are looking for help in doing some of these things, I encourage you to reach out to me at stepheno'rose.com. I know a ton of great folks, like all the people on this podcast, and people I can connect you to. And I'm not saying connect with me for work, but find me on LinkedIn. Let's have this conversation. Let me refer you to people, things like that. And I'm happy to sit down with anybody and have a good conversation on how they can start to prepare for this, or see me at one of the many events that I'll be speaking on. I just put up a LinkedIn post on all the different events I'm doing over the next months, including being at Budapest this fall. So I'm very excited
I
about
saw that, and I was very envious of the travel that you're going to be doing.
Mexico
this
City,
year.
Budapest, 2 here in Seattle. So yeah, I'm looking forward to getting back out there and seeing everybody. So, and of course, check out the show with Darrell and I. We have a great time doing it. Darrell?
Yeah, I think I'd plug a couple of other areas that I create content. I'm doing a weekly show also with Daniel Glenn on the 365 Message Center show. So we have been tearing up that Message Center for probably 7 years-ish now, and trying to create awareness of what's going on, what's going on, as the song goes. The other thing, yeah, whoa. I wonder how many songs. Well, that's something else we could ask ChatGPT.
Yes.
Anyway, the other place I'm creating content is Modern Work Mentor. So that is all about trying to help people understand and make sense of the modern work space, and that's my channel. So you'll find me there, trying to get creative.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Well, again, thank you guys for being returning guests on the show. We definitely owe you some cloud architect swag when we next bump into you in some part of the world, whether it is Auckland Airport or somewhere else. But really appreciate you guys having on. Great episode. Great time chatting to you.
And as soon as
Lovely
we're
guy.
done, can we then say all the words that we couldn't say during the show about the slang terms that we can use in parts of the world and not? I think
True.
Outtakes.
Yeah, that'd be
There we
so
go.
cool. Beep.
And we're out.